Hi, I'm Michelle and welcome back to Somewhere in Bookland. This is my April wrap-up. I managed to read a total of 6 books. The first book I read in the month of April is Breakaway by Kate Cameron, which I received from NetGalley as an ARC, and I was a little behind and read it. This book is about this guy, Logan, who is an ex-hockey player, and he managed to make it to the big time before injuring himself and ending his career. So he moves to a town that happens to be all about hockey, and there he meets this girl, Dawn, who wants nothing to do with hockey players. She had dated a hockey player in the past, but realized that it made her be put into this role of a hockey player's girlfriend and didn't really allow her to be herself. I gave this book a 3 stars. I loved Logan's character arc in this book and how he went from being unhappy with where he was in life to finally accepting his place in life and being happy with himself. I felt like Dawn was a little much for me. I understand that she felt like, especially in the town that she was in, that her life revolved so much around hockey, and I understand where she was coming from with the aspect of not wanting to be known simply as a hockey player's girlfriend, but wanting to be known on her own and in her own terms. But she was still a little bit too much for me, and I feel like the main problem in this book was just that the characters needed to talk to each other and come up with some type of list where they had like boundaries set, and honestly I feel like if they had talked it out, hashed it out sooner, it would have been a lot of a quicker book, but a lot of the drama would have been avoided if they had just listened to each other's sides and understood each other more. But yes, this book was 3 stars. The next book I read was Rebel Air by Vi Keeland and Penelope Ward. This book I also gave 3 stars. It's the first in a duet, and it's about this girl, Gia, who ends up working, she's a writer, she ends up working at this bar covering for her best friend, and the bar owner there, Rush, ends up meeting her and they kind of get into it a little bit, and then she ends up getting a job at the bar, and she gets to know Rush, she falls for Rush, and it's kind of just their journey. I was aware that this book ended on a cliffhanger going into it, and so I was kind of trying to predict the cliffhanger the whole time. I managed to get it before the book ended, so that was a thing I was happy about with myself, but I didn't necessarily like this book. There's some things about it that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I will probably still read the next book because of the cliffhanger that it did leave out on. I kind of want to see how it's going to be wrapped up. I did feel there was a little bit of unnecessary slut shaming in this book. That kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Plus Rush, I felt like he was supposed to be a very swoon-worthy character, and he was supposed to say these things that just made you like melt, but honestly, he said some things that I thought were just so laughable and hilarious, and I would be reading this book and I literally was laughing out loud at some of the things that I think were supposed to be romantic, and I was telling my girlfriend them when I was reading him because I was like, oh my gosh, you won't believe what they just said. I mean, there's a point in the book where Gia is yelling at Rush, and he's completely ignoring the fact that she's angry with him and completely tunes her out, and then makes, like, when he finally does talk to her, he makes a comment about like having sex with her, and she slaps him, and I'm just like, well duh, you're gonna get slapped. Like really, if this is the guy I'm supposed to find swoon worthy, I don't know how I feel about that, but I will probably still keep reading the second book. The next book I read was Challenge Accepted by Amanda Abram, and this was also a 3-star read. This book is about this girl Emma and this guy Logan, who have been next door neighbors for forever, and their fathers are actually best friends, and so they grew up together, spent a lot of time together, don't get along at all. Logan's the popular jock, Emma's the nerdy bookworm, and they just don't get along. Then one day they take this test that's supposed to match them with their perfect match at school, and Emma's really serious about this test. She really wants to find someone. Logan doesn't want to take the test, but his girlfriend not girlfriend at the time is making him take it because she wants to prove that they are a good match, and Logan doesn't want to be a good match, so he lies on all his answers and puts the opposite of what he really thinks, thus matching him up with Emma. Once he realizes that Emma is his match, he bails on her. She thinks she's been stood up, and she's so sad about it. She finds out that he was the one who stood her up, so he vows to help her find her perfect match and set her up with someone. So that's the premise of this book. I liked Emma because she's such a book nerd and I related to her, and I thought the premise had the chance to be really cute. So I related to Emma, but Logan just kind of got on my nerves. I thought it was annoying the way that he just kind of like messed up her summer, messed up like what she wanted, her hopes, and then was just like, oh, I'll fix it by hooking you up with someone. And he thought he would fix it by changing everything about her. Like, I understand that's a trope and it's in a lot of movies and TV shows and books, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I just felt in this book it didn't really work super well. And another thing that tends to happen in a lot of those tropes happened again in this book, and that's that Logan realizes that, you know what, she's actually hot once he sees her out of her baggy clothes, and that was so frustrating. The next book I read in the month of April was Breathe by Abby Glines, and I gave this book 2 stars. And this book didn't really age that well. It was published a couple years ago, and already they make references in this book that are kind of old and not necessarily really relatable now. So I understand you want to make references in books to be current, but also you risk the chance of the references kind of being outdated in just a few short years. Now, I picked up this book because I really wanted a rock star romance, and that's what this book is. It's about this girl, Sadie, who is helping her mom out and goes to be like a maid at this rock star's house. This rock star is Jax. He has a house he likes to go during the summers for a little bit of a break, a little bit of a place where he can just be himself. And normally there's no younger girls that are allowed to work there because they don't want him distracted, or he doesn't want them fangirling over him. But he meets Sadie and she's the opposite. She doesn't fangirl over him, and it kind of intrigues him. I mean, this book was so cheesy and unrealistic, and Sadie was just so naive about everything. There's this guy she's friends with, and he's obviously into her, like super obviously into her, and she doesn't realize it until something's said, and then she's just like, oh well, I didn't realize and I'm sorry, and it was just annoying. Plus, sometimes I don't mind insta love and sometimes I do. It just kind of depends on if it fits into the book and if they still develop a really good relationship like after the insta love, and it just depends on the book really. This one was super insta love. Like, Jack sees her and like immediately would do anything to have her, and I felt that I didn't like that very much. And honestly, Jax is a little possessive over her, which I also wasn't the biggest fan of. So yes, this was a 2-star read for me. The next book I read in the month of April was The Wall of Winnipeg and Me by Mariana Zapata, and I gave this book a 5 stars because can you say slow burn? Because that's what this book was. Mariana Zapata is the queen of the slowest slow burn romances ever. She creates stories that literally have you begging for something to happen between the characters, and I like this because when it's slow burn, you really get to see the relationship between the characters develop more than if it was a quicker, like more insta love type thing. So this book follows this girl, Vanessa, who is an assistant to Aiden Graves, aka The Wall of Winnipeg. He's in football and she basically does everything for him. She cooks, she cleans, she does all that. But she also has her own business on the side, and she's been saving up money so she can quit and focus all her attention on this. And Aiden's not the most warm, cuddly, friendly person. He doesn't really let people in. throughout her whole time working with him, she hasn't really gotten to know him very well. So it's a shocker to her when she quits and he shows up on her doorstep 2 weeks later begging her to come back. And then he comes up with this proposition for her. He's gonna get deported and he wants her to marry him so he could stay in the country. They'll be married for a couple years, and then afterward he'll make sure she's set up really nice. She ends up accepting this proposition and moving in with him, and you kind of see that relationship progress as she's living with him. I also really loved Aiden's roommate, who was also a football player, and how close she was with him, because that way at least she had a friendly face in the house. She had someone she felt like she could talk to and rely on. And I especially liked that it was someone other than just her best friend, because her best friend was going through a lot of her own problems at the time, and I think that if Vanessa would have relied completely on her best friend, then it would have made her best friend's problems a little worse. And you get to go into both of these characters' backstories. I love that we get to see that backstory, and it makes you feel bad for them, but it also gives them something to connect over, and it really added that extra dimension to the characters. So yes, I enjoyed this book. I gave it a 5 stars. And the last book I read was Stay Sweet by Saban Vivian, and I gave this book a 3 stars as well. This book takes place in this town called Sand Lake, which has this Mead's Creamery ice cream stand in it that has historically been run by only girls. Now, the main girl, Amelia, and her best friend Kate have worked there over the summers, and this year Amelia is going to be the head girl of the shop. But the owner of the ice cream stand passes away before the first day even happens, and her grandnephew arrives to run the shop, and it's the first time a boy is going to be in the shop. And he has some changes he wants to make. And that kind of causes conflict between him and Amelia and the other girls, since she's still trying to do her job as head girl and honor the changes that he wants to make when they don't necessarily agree with him. Now, this story had a cute premise, and overall the story was pretty good, but I didn't really feel much of a connection to the characters in general. And I mean, Amelia is a really nice character who is admittedly a little naive as well, but her friend Kate was so annoying to me and so not understanding of the position that Amelia was in, and she didn't really seem to care about anything except for what she wanted. And then there was that whole romance aspect between Amelia and the grandnephew, and I felt like the romance was actually a little bland, and I felt like this book could have actually been stronger if the romance hadn't been a part of it and it had instead focused on the friendships of all the girls at the Mead Creamery. And yes, so I gave this book a 3 stars. So those are the 6 books that I read in the month of April. Click like if you like this video, click subscribe if you want to see more of this face in your feed, and I'll see you guys soon.